Welcome to this special edition of Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight we are paying special tribute to Black History Month.
We'll introduce you to some amazing people, share inspiring stories, and hopefully encourage you in your faith.
First up, the name Uncle Tom is used as a racially charged stereotype.
Still, the inspiration for the character in the 19th century's best-selling novel was a real man who lived an extraordinary life. Uncle Tom's Cabin has been cited as a factor leading to the Civil War.
The book struck at our emotions as a nation, and it made us see ourselves. It was our emotional mirror, and it prompted some individuals to rethink how they thought of slavery.
When Abraham Lincoln later met the author, Harriet Beecher Stowe, he reportedly said, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war."
In the South, the book was banned. And if you were caught selling the book, you were either going to be killed or thrown in prison. There was tremendous fear that this book would make a difference.
It did by portraying Uncle Tom as a dignified, intelligent, God-fearing man. In the South, however, traveling Tom shows became popular, depicting him as a submissive buffoon, happy in his enslaved condition, a stereotype that still exists today. There were also attempts to discredit Harriet Beecher Stowe. The author countered with a key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, an exhaustive bibliography of the real people behind her fictional characters. It included her primary inspiration for Uncle Tom.
Josiah Henson was an individual who demonstrated extraordinary courage. He tried to help other people, especially whites in this country, to understand the reality of slavery.
Josiah Henson's story begins here in Rockville, Maryland, on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Now, this suburban neighborhood was once a 570-acre plantation, and the house behind me is where the owner lived, a man named Isaac Riley.
In this time period, masters wanted to present themselves to be very benevolent, these patriarchs who cared about their people that were enslaved, but the presentation that Henson gives us was that didn't happen for Isaac Riley.
I faithfully served Riley for many years. He was coarse and vulgar in his habits, and unprincipled and cruel in his general deportment.
Henson's autobiography provides many examples of Riley's cruelty, like the day he discovered a book on grammar hidden in 9-year-old Josiah's cap.
When Riley saw the book, of course, he was outraged because it was unheard of that his enslaved people would learn to read and write.
"Pick up that book," he cried, using an awful oath. At last, I was obliged to do it, when he beat me across the head and back till my eyes were swollen and I became unconscious.
Despite the harsh treatment, Henson proved to be trustworthy. Eventually elevated to overseeing the plantation, he was able to ease the harsh conditions faced by his fellow slaves. When he was 18, he was even allowed to attend a revival meeting. Although not permitted to enter the church, he heard a life-changing message from preacher John McKinney.
He said, "Jesus Christ, the Son of God, tasted death for every man." It touched my heart, and I cried out, "I wonder if Jesus Christ died for me." Again and again did the preacher reiterate the words, "for every man." Oh, the blessedness and sweetness of feeling that I was loved.
And that meant a lot to him because he knew that God would always be on his side. He would deliver him, and he would decide his plan in life.
The plan included moving his family and 18 others to Isaac Riley's brother's home in Kentucky. Henson came to regret that decision. 3 years after their arrival in Kentucky, those who followed him were put up for auction.
Husbands and wives, parents and children were to be separated forever. From that hour, I saw through, hated, and cursed the whole system of slavery. One absorbing purpose occupied my soul: to gain freedom, self-assertion, and deliverance from the cruel caprices and fortunes of dissolute tyrants.
Because of Henson's management skills, he and his family were initially allowed to stay together. 2 years later, however, his time had come. The only option, escape. A major obstacle was the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, which meant he and his family could be captured even in a free state. So he set his sights on Canada.
It was a 600-mile journey that he would have to make on foot with his wife and 4 children, traveling by night, sleeping by day, super dangerous. But he knows he's got to go to Canada. It's the only place that he can truly be a free man.
His wife made a sling for Josiah to carry the 2 youngest children on his back. After 40 grueling days, they arrived at Lake Erie just across the water from Canada. A sympathetic ship captain offered to take them the rest of the way.
He put his hand on my head and said, "Be a good fellow, won't you?" I felt streams of emotion running down in electric courses from head to foot. "Yes," said I, "I'll use my freedom well."
Henson helped start a black settlement in Ontario, including a multiracial school, almost unheard of at the time. To raise money and awareness, he preached throughout the United States and England, where he was granted a private audience with Queen Victoria. During those years, he risked his life to help a total of 118 slaves reach freedom in Canada.
He's an inspiration for me personally, and I hope for many people as they hear this story, to use our freedom well, right? To use our resources, our time, our money, our energy, our voice, our influence, to use it on behalf of those with less than us.
Josiah Henson visited the plantation he once managed near the end of his life.
Though many of his experiences were unimaginably painful, Josiah could see God's hand in them, later writing, quote, "Sharp flashes of lightning come from black clouds." Up next, meet Gladys West and see her incredible journey from small-town farm life to laying the groundwork for world-changing technology we all use today.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
It's what starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
GPS technology is something a lot of us rely on every day to get where we're going.
88-year-old Gladys West told us she never could have imagined where the project she spent years working on would eventually lead.
She also gives God the glory for the path she traveled in her life. Here's Charlene Aaron.
Born in 1930, Gladys grew up on her family's farm just south of Richmond, Virginia, where she learned the value of hard work. And that would pay off for Gladys, who wanted more than what life on a country farm could offer.
You could get a scholarship if you were the first or second in your high school graduating class. So right off, you know, I was Johnny on the spot, doing all my work all the time.
She finished at the top of her high school class, earning her a full scholarship to what was then called Virginia State College, a historically black school in Petersburg, Virginia.
The teachers were encouraging me to major in math because they thought that I would be good.
Again, Gladys finished at the top of her class and went on to complete her master's. In 1956, she accepted a job at the Naval Support Facility in Dahlgren, Virginia. The space race was just taking off, and computers were the wave of the future.
It was really an excitement, you know. They promised us that they would teach us, you know, how to communicate with this computer and all this stuff, you know. So, knowing me, I was ready to, to work hard with it.
And work hard she did. With the success of the space program, NASA was beginning to place satellites into orbit. Gladys was tasked to help write and program code, needed to process the enormous amount of data coming in.
You have a long equation and there are certain coefficients that go along with each term. You have to generate them, get them accurate and all. Our program encoded all those equations, and we checked them out by hand cases and all, and they were passed on to the next level.
The work was long and tedious. Every equation checked and rechecked for accuracy.
You didn't want to cause anybody else any holdups or any trouble about something that you had done that prevented them from making progress. So you want to have to make sure that they could depend on anything that you sent.
It was this tenacity and dedication that drew the attention of the fellow mathematician Ira West. The two dated for 18 months before getting married in 1957.
She wasn't an easy catch, you know. Let me tell you, I had to work hard for that.
I always think of Ira, and I always tell me, I said, he played more than I did.
Meanwhile, the civil rights movement was sweeping the country. Gladys and Ira wanted to show their support, but government employees weren't allowed to participate in public demonstrations. So the couple decided the best way to help was to change perceptions and work even harder.
We just were pushing. We couldn't participate directly, but indirectly in the situation.
That was another reason why I felt that I always had to be my best, and I always had to be a role model.
In the years that followed, they both continued their work for the Navy on numerous projects. In 1978, Gladys received a commendation for her work and was promoted to project manager of the CSAT radar altimetry project, the first satellite that could collect data across the ocean's surface.
It was always interesting. We're working with people and doing something that was important and that's going to be used by the government and all. You got to make sure you're doing everything right because you're part of this big thing that's happening.
As she always had, Gladys stayed true to herself, striving to be defined by her competence and not by the color of her skin.
I think I was most happy when I got to the point that I could be independent and I could troubleshoot big programs and be a help to the analysts who had helped to generate the program. When I could talk to them, you know, it's sort of like be a part and understand. I think that was the best feeling I had.
Even after retiring in 1998, Gladys stayed busy, completing her PhD in philosophy and writing her memoirs. For all of her accomplishments, commendations, and recognition she has received over her career, Gladys understands there is only one who she can credit for the direction her life has taken.
I think everybody should have God in their lives so they understand. And I can just about see the complete circle. And I can go back and I can look and see what he did and where he put me and where all along. And I was thinking, it's just amazing that I didn't understand at the time exactly what was happening, but he was there and he was doing it.
Well, stay with us. Up next, Hollywood takes the story of Harriet Tubman's bravery to the big screen and shines the spotlight on her secret weapon, her faith.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. Well, she was called the Moses of her people, a former slave who had become the greatest Underground Railroad agent of all time. Now Harriet Tubman's extraordinary life story is on the big screen.
Ephraim Graham sat down with the film's director and stars to bring us this behind-the-scenes look at the movie Harriet.
This is the last known photograph of Harriet Tubman, taken about a month before she died in Auburn, New York, where she's also buried with the simple epitaph, Servant of God, well done. The incredible life story behind these 5 final words begins here in Dorchester County, Maryland, where she was born into slavery in 1822 and named Arminta Ross. Today, there's a new mural just outside the town's Tubman Museum and a regular crowd of tourists. Biographer Kate Clifford Larson shares Harriet's story in Bound for the Promised Land, Harriet Tubman, Portrait of an American Hero.
Rattle off a quick resume for me of Harriet Tubman. Who was this 5-foot-tall woman?
She was the middle child of 9 children of Ben and Rit Ross. She had 4 brothers and 4 sisters, and she had this intensity about her, this love for her family, love for her community, profound, deep faith that guided her and protected her. All of those things made this woman that became the greatest, Underground Railroad agent of all time.
I think I'm going to back it off a little bit.
That agent's story is now a major motion picture, directed by Casey Lemons.
There's not much time. You got to be miles away from here before dawn. Where is she? Follow that North Star. Fear is your enemy. Whoa. Easy now.
I'm gonna be free or die.
It's almost like my action film, This is my superhero film.
Harriet's superpower? Traveling more than 100 miles on foot at least a dozen times to free more than 70 slaves.
I don't know if you know how extraordinary this is, but you have made it 100 miles to freedom all by yourself. Would you like to pick a new name to mark your freedom?
Harriet Tubman.
Seeing your film, reading more about her, it still stuns me that she was illiterate.
Yeah, and remained illiterate. Yeah, she never learned. She said she didn't have a talent for it. But also she had a more important communication.
Tony Award-winning actress Cynthia Erivo plays the role of Harriet.
Edward Broadus is your master.
And fellow Broadway star Leslie Odom Jr. plays the role of abolitionist William Still.
Rescuing slaves requires skill and careful planning. It requires reading, Harriet. Can you read a sign or a map? Can you read it all?
I put my attention on trying to hear God's voice more clearly.
Do you know what would happen if you got caught? They would torture you until you pointed them right to this office.
Cynthia, what would you say the greatest lesson Harriet Tubman taught you in doing this film?
That even when you feel small or insignificant, that you probably have more power than you know. That I have more strength and will in me in order to change the world, and I have stuff to offer this world. Yeah.
Because even in terms of stature, I mean...
She was 5 foot.
And you're about?
5 foot.
Papers. It says here you're 5.5 feet tall. You ain't more than 5 feet.
Must have won my high boots that day.
I'd venture to say that for many of us, you were introducing us to William because we did not know about him.
Sure.
Who is he?
Sure. William was is known as the father of the Underground Railroad. He's an abolitionist, a writer, a brilliant man, and a friend to Harriet Tubman. He was really the last stop on the Underground Railroad, on this great network.
And there's nothing more you can do.
Don't you tell me what I can't do. I made it this far on my own. God was watching, but my feet was my own. Running, bleeding, climbing, nearly drowned, nothing to eat for days and days, man. I made it. So don't you tell me what I can't do.
This is the first theatrical film on the life of Harriet Tubman. Why do you think it's taken this long?
Well, I know that there have been many attempts up until this point. Even this film itself took a very long time. It was written 20 years ago and really didn't start seeing the light of day until 10 years ago. And it was 3 years from the moment Deborah found me. And so it's taken its time. But I think, you know, Casey and I like to joke that maybe Harriet decided that now is the time for her.
And for a woman who believed in God's perfect timing, that's no surprise. Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Dorchester County, Maryland.
When we come back, a powerful moment in the courtroom leads to a powerful challenge for all of us. We explore where sin and consequences meet grace and forgiveness on the road to reconciliation. Faith Nation continues. Stay with us.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
I forgive you. Those 3 words uttered by a man to the police officer who killed his brother caught the world off guard.
And it also sparked a conversation about forgiveness and the role it plays in our justice system. It's a conversation so powerful and so needed, we wanted to leave you with it as a final thought for this special program. Here's CBN's Eric Phillips.
When 18-year-old Brant John publicly forgave Amber Geiger for his brother's death, he made it clear that he was speaking for himself. Still, many could not understand this act of grace. Even some Christians were conflicted.
I forgive you, and I know if you go to God and ask Him, He will forgive you.
Those words came about a year after Dallas police officer Amber Geiger killed his brother, Botham John, in his own apartment. After working a long shift, she had somehow mistaken John's apartment for hers and shot him because she says she was afraid. John's little brother then went even further.
But I love you just like anyone else. I don't even want you to go to jail. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
When we watch Brant and Jean offer forgiveness in that courtroom, we're watching God enter the room. Because forgiveness like that is not a human act.
Doesn't sell. Pastor Bill Haley leads Oracle, a ministry which focuses on spiritual development and action. Coincidentally, his Virginia property houses an old slave graveyard. Haley says racism led to death back then and today. While Haley saw the act as beyond honorable, some were infuriated.
Because black people are always being asked to forgive. And it's a lot to forgive. In fact, I think the black church is the teacher for the country on what Jesus meant when he said, forgive other people. They've had a lot of practice.
I think too often, particularly in conservative Christian spaces, we can be very forgetful of the 500-year history of our country.
Minister David Bailey specializes in racial reconciliation. He says an expectation for blacks to forgive goes back to slavery. On top of that, he says justice isn't just.
If that black man killed the white police officer because he got confused about where he was, that was not going to be a thing. Like, that brother was going to go to jail for the rest of his life, might have got the electric chair.
In this case, the judge sentenced Geiger to 10 years in prison.
10 years seems merciful. It seems so hard to have a police officer suitably punished for an action that is egregious and clearly over the line.
For Christians, this situation and others like it present a challenge.
You got to see both the sin and the effects of sin, the consequences of sin, but then you also have to see the opportunities for grace and forgiveness in God.
The world saw another example in 2015 after Dylan Roof killed 9 people at a black church in Charleston, South Carolina. Days later, family members offered forgiveness.
Took something very precious away from me. I would never talk to her ever again. I would never be able to hold her again. But I forgive you.
It's not something Marquise Jefferson wanted to do in October of last year.
I don't want no hug.
After an officer in Fort Worth, Texas, shot and killed his daughter, Tatiana Jefferson, in her own home in front of her nephew, Jefferson made this declaration.
That's my one and only daughter. I'll never forget this.
Sadly, Jefferson died just 1 month after his daughter was killed. He died from a heart attack, literally a broken heart. Bailey says Brant John's offer of forgiveness was more for him than the officer.
For that brother to walk around with unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. And so, I mean, that brother needed to be free. So he did that for him, you know, and he did that out of his relationship with God. Justice! Now! Unforgiveness is not the answer. Not showing grace is not the answer, but exercising grace and exercising forgiveness without truth is also not the answer.
Of course, from a legal perspective, whether or not a person receives the grace of forgiveness has nothing to do with how they're punished, but it can make a difference in the court of public opinion. In Washington, Eric Phillips, CBN News.
And that is going to do it for Faith Nation tonight.
We'll see you back here tomorrow.